That includes you. You are foreigners.
Our freedom that we fought for, it must be respected.
What is happening in our country is not acceptable.
Of the violence overnight here in Jeepistown. We are in the east of Johannesburg.
Imagine surviving 300 years of oppression. Imagine fighting, bleeding, dying for the right to exist in your own country. Imagine finally winning.
I assume, as executive president in the service of the Republic of South Africa,
and then turning that same hatred on your brothers. This is South Africa in 2026, a nation that once moved the entire world with its story of forgiveness and rebirth, and is now hunting foreigners in their streets.
I think South Africa is a bad country because they're killing us for no reason.
We are tired of being beaten every day. We're all Africa. Why must we be afraid to go to South Africa?
African foreigners, black foreigners, people who look just like them. But here's the thing. Here's something that no one is talking about. The white people. They are not being touched. So before we go any further, I need you to understand this. South Africa has one of the most documented history of racial violence on earth. Apartheid wasn't just segregation, it was a system of total dehumanization. Black South Africans could not vote. They could not own property. They could not walk freely in their own country. Now, white South Africans and white South African institutions built that system, enforced it, and profited from it for decades. And yet, in 2026, the people being chased and killed in South Africa are not white. They are Zimbabweans, Nigerians, Mozambican, Congolese, Somali, Malawi. Now, ask yourself this: how does that happen? Because that question, that one uncomfortable, hard to answer question, is exactly what this video is all about. Let's talk about facts. Before we can understand why this is happening, we need to understand what is happening and how bad it actually is. South Africa is currently experiencing what experts call cyclical xenophobia. This is not new, but it is getting worse. These are the numbers that they don't want you to see. Since 2008, there have been at least 7 major waves of xenophobic violence in South Africa. In 2008 alone, 62 people were killed and 100,000 were displaced in a single 2-week period. The entire communities were wiped out overnight. Each time, the targets are the same: Africans, to be specific. In 2019, attacks spread to Lagos, Nigeria. Nigerians fought back. South African businesses in Nigeria were burned down in retaliation. 2 countries, 2 African giants almost went to war against each other. Let that sink in. And all of this is happening in a country where the white population still owns approximately 72% of privately held land in South Africa. The economic inequality left by apartheid has barely moved. In 2021, a movement was born in the townships of South Africa. They called themselves Operation Dudula. In Zulu, Dudula means to push out or to force back. Their mission statement: remove undocumented foreign nationals from South Africa. Their methods: march into foreign-owned shops, demand papers. If the papers aren't there, or even sometimes when they are there, destroy the shops, beat the owner, burn the stock. Operation Dudula specifically targeted black African migrants, the Somali shop owner down the road, the Zimbabwean working at the restaurant, the Malawian domestic worker, that houseboy, house girl, that Zimbabwean vendor. Not once, not a single recorded instance did Operation Dudula march on a white-owned business and demanded to see papers. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I lost it somehow when I was researching, but not once. To understand what's happening today, you have to go back, not just to 1994, not just to apartheid, but you have to go back to the very architecture of how South Africa was built and how its politics were designed to make black people fight each other. instead of fighting the system. Under apartheid, the government created what they called homelands. These were designated areas, territories where different black ethnic groups were supposed to live. The genius, the evil genius of this system was not just separation, it was identity engineering. It took people who had fluid, interconnected identities and hardened them into rigid, competing tribes. So the whole idea of this separation was, you are not South African, you are Zulu. They are not your brothers, they are Xhosa. And those people over the border, Mozambicans, Zimbabweans, they are even further away from you. Apartheid planted seeds of distrust between black Africans that still grow today. When you have been told for generations that your identity is ethnic, not national, it becomes very easy to see the Zimbabwean in your neighborhood as an outsider. The architects of apartheid are gone, but their psychological construction is still standing. April 27, 1994, black South Africans voted for the first time. Lines stretched for miles, people wept, the world watched. Nelson Mandela became president. The Rainbow Nation was born, and with it came a promise: things are going to get better. 32 years later, that promise is still unpaid. South Africa has a 32% official unemployment rate.
The government of South Africa is rich enough to get you free school, rich enough to get you free hospital, rich enough to give you free money. Take advantage on that. Do not wait for foreigners to leave. They will never.
When you include people who have given up looking for work, that number climbs up past 40%. Youth employment is above 60%. The education system is in collapse. Water, electricity in a middle-income country are luxury in many areas. Load shedding has crippled the entire industry. The ANC, the party of Mandela, the party that liberated South Africa, has been in power since 1994. If I'm not mistaken, it has been, 32 years. And during that time, a generation was born, grew up, graduated, and found nothing. When you have nothing, you need someone to blame. This is where it gets calculated. This is where it gets political. Between 2008 and today, each major wave of xenophobic violence in South Africa has almost without exception connected with one thing: an election cycle. So literally every time that there is an attack on foreign nationals in South Africa, it means that we're getting closer to elections. This is not a coincidence. The playbook is old and it is global. When your people are angry at you, redirect their anger at someone smaller, someone more vulnerable, someone who can't vote against you. Immigrants have no political power. Take their jobs, take their opportunity. This is the strategy. We need to talk about the elephant in the room. If South Africa's violence is about economic desperation, about unemployment, about inequality, about the failed promises of liberation, then why is the anger directed at a Zimbabwean man selling tomatoes in a market and not at a white-owned corporation that has operated on stolen land for 100 years? Let that sink in. Why is a Somali shop owner's business burned to the ground, while a white mining executive lives behind 3 layers of security in Senton, completely untouched? This is not a rhetorical question. This has a real answer, several answers actually.
This South Africa is owned by a white man. This South Africa is controlled by the white man. The white people, the way they control us, we love them and we say they give us jobs. But the way they've made us to hate each other, even if a Nigerian was to come here and create 100,000 jobs, you will still beat that Nigerian because you want 100,000 jobs provided by a white man.
The first answer is geographic and economic. The violence in South Africa is not random, it is proximate. Xenophobic attacks happen in townships, in informal settlements, in places where resources are the scarcest. In Alexandra, one of Johannesburg's poorest townships, a foreign national operating a small shop directly competes with a local who has no job and no income. Every rand that customer spends in that foreign shop feels like a rand stolen from a South African nationality. There is a brutal simple principle at work here. People attack what they can reach, and the system, the apartheid system, was never dismantled. It made sure that white economic power was unreachable. Here's something that makes this even more complex. In many poor communities across South Africa, white South Africans are seen as employers, as authority, as the people who hold the keys to the economic survival. This is not admiration, this is not forgiveness, this is the psychological residue of a system that trained black South Africans across generations to relate to white people as gatekeepers of resources. Some of the South Africans right now, they think that white people are gatekeepers of resources. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, even if that hand once held a whip. The foreign African, on the other hand, is seen as a competitor, not a boss, not a gatekeeper, a rival. And rivals at the end of the day in a zero-sum survival environment are dangerous. White South Africans, despite being only 7.3% of the populations, control a disproportionate share of capital, business, land, and institutional power. They pay enormous amounts of tax. They run large employers. They have connections to the international capital and international market. So at the end of the day, they are untouchable because the government needs them. Not publicly, not ideologically, but practically. So at the end of the day, driving them out, investments collapses. The economy collapses too. The EFF, Julius Malema's economic freedom fighters, are the only major party talking about land, proper land sharing, and white economic privilege in a serious way. And what has that gotten them? Let's destroy one myth right now. The claim made by Operation Dudula and echoed by politicians who should know better is that foreign nationals are stealing jobs from South Africa. The World Bank, the African Development Bank, and multiple South African academic institutions have studied this. Migrants do not steal jobs, they create them. I'll repeat, they do not steal jobs, they create them. Foreign nationals in South Africa, particularly from Zimbabwe, Nigeria, and Mozambique, start small businesses when they go to South Africa. They employ South Africans, they fill skills gaps in healthcare, engineering, and technology that South Africa desperately needs at the end of the day. Nigerian doctors, Zimbabwean teachers, Malawian agricultural workers doing labor that South Africans in those areas won't do. But facts have never stopped a good scapegoat from working in Africa, no. There is a historical irony in what South Africa is doing to its neighbors that is almost too painful to say out loud. During apartheid, when the ANC was banned, when Mandela was in prison, when black South Africans had nowhere to go, the continent of Africa opened its arms to South Africa. Zambia gave the ANC a headquarters in Lusaka. Tanzania trained ANC soldiers. Zimbabwe, still called Rhodesia back then, still fighting its own liberation wars, sheltered South African freedom fighters. Mozambique paid a price in blood for supporting the ANC. The apartheid government retaliated with massacres. Google that. Nigeria poured money into the anti-apartheid movement for decades. Nigerian students boycotted South African goods. Nigerian governments led the international pressure campaign for South Africa to be where they are right now. The entire continent of Africa, poor, conflict-ridden as it was, stood up for South Africa when South Africa was going through a lot and could not stand up for itself. And now, 32 years later, the children and grandchildren of those freedom fighters are burning Nigerian shops. They are deporting Zimbabweans. They are calling Mozambicans criminals, of which most of it is true. Some of these people, when they go to South Africa, they're doing wrong things. They're committing crimes. So if you have to look at a bigger picture also, South Africans have a good reason to do what they're doing. But to get to an extent where they are pushing around people the way they're doing it right now, it's wrong. South Africa, they're doing to their liberators exactly what was done to them. There is a Zulu concept, Ubuntu. Ubuntu was the foundation of the anti-apartheid struggle, but it became the first casualty of cyclical xenophobia. When you burn a Zimbabwean man's shop, a man who came here for the same reasons your grandfather moved to Johannesburg from a rural homeland, you destroy Ubuntu. You destroy the thing that made South Africa worth fighting for in the first place. How does this end? Now we come to the question that matters most, because history doesn't just happen. It is made by choice. In the worst scenario, South Africa continues on its current trajectory. Xenophobia intensifies, political movements like Operation Dudula gain electoral power, the scapegoating of foreign nationals becomes official policy but subtle, deportations increases, violence becomes normalized. If this keeps on happening, regional relationships is broken to the point that South Africa's neighbors begin economic retaliation. The skilled South Africans who have immigrated, moved to other countries in search of better opportunities, the doctors, the engineers and teachers who left because of crime and instability in South Africa, they don't come back. They would not risk their own future to come back to South Africa. This is not a story of collapse, it is a story of slow rot. And slow rot is in many ways harder to fight than a crisis, because it never hits the threshold that forces action. And then there is the third path, the hard one, the one that requires courage. It requires South African political leaders to stop using immigrants as a political buffer, to actually address unemployment not with scapegoating, but with structural economic reform. It requires land reform, real land reform, not just legislation that sits in parliament, but a genuine redistribution of the economic foundations that apartheid built. It requires a national conversation, honest, painful, and sparing about the psychological damage that apartheid did, not just to individuals, but to communities, to economic imagination, to the way South Africans relate to each other and to Africa. It requires South Africa to remember what it owes to the continent, and it requires ordinary South Africans, the ones who don't burn shops, who don't march in operations Dudula t-shirts, to be louder than the ones who do, because those people exist. South Africans who shelter their Zimbabwean neighbors, who hire the Somali engineer, who march against xenophobia, they exist. And at the end of the day, if you have to look at a bigger picture, history has never been made by the loudest voices. In 1964, Nelson Mandela stood in a South African courtroom and gave what became known as the "I am prepared to die" speech. He did not just speak for black South Africans, he spoke for humanity. The world listened, the world responded, because Mandela understood something fundamental. You cannot build freedom on someone else's oppression. South Africa learned that lesson under the most brutal of conditions. South Africa can be different. It has been different before. In 1994, it gave the world a reason to believe in redemption. The question is whether it can find that belief again before it runs out of neighbors to blame, and before it runs out of time.